I would take this, I had this on the lathe between centers, and then I turned it, and after I got the thing round, I looked to see where the knots are. You see the scratch line here? So that's a line going through them, and if the knots are lined up there, fine. If they're off, well, you tilt it a little bit. Tilt it one way or another. Try and get these knots lined up so that they're in one plane. It ain't going to happen, but get close. And having had that, now I know that these knots start out here and they finish up at the pith. Nowhere else for them to go. They go from the pith out to where you see them. And if you look at the knot, you can tell that the pith that you're looking at here, it's got more wood on one side than the other. So the side that's got more wood, obviously this has more wood. You know, a branch gets support from underneath. So that means that when you look at this, the knot is going to be tilted this way. So that tells you which way. Now in this case then, I wanted to get this, I know that these knots finish up at the pith, and I started turning. I cut away on this until I just see the ends, very ends of the knots. And it's just a hint. You're seeing no more than an 1/8 inch. But once you spot that, you stop, and now the piece is ready to be made into a side grain. I cut away what I don't need. I got it marked. I'm going to put this between centers, between here and here, and proceed to turn it. And you can tell that, you know, there's a little rumpy bump going on here, but when the wood is reasonably wet, it goes pretty quick. So if you can get this, I think that'll be of some help. You might want to take a look at that, pass that around. And no, I don't want it back. So then, you know, whenever I do a demo, I usually spend the first couple of days doing nothing but this because, you know, I forget. You know, oh, I did this. You know, there are nuances here that you got to refresh yourself on. So one of the pieces I did, and this piece will tell you, it's got every mistake that you thought of. First is, I was in a hurry to do this, so I put this on a dovetail chuck. Now, one of the things you don't ever do is use a dovetail chuck on a side grain, because that dovetail has already started cracking the whole thing off. You know, if you're very careful, fine, and we all get away with it. But if you stress this at all, it comes apart. So what do you know? This thing broke off. So that was the first step. So then, in the process of that breaking off, of course, it flew off the lathe and lost about this much in height. Well, I thought, at this point, should we stop? Well, no, I still need to practice. So I kept going. Now, the piece was also a little farther along than I wanted. I would have wanted it fresher, but this is what I had. And so I did indeed finish it. I hollowed it out, let it dry, and put a couple of coats of 3408 on to bring this out. So of course I then stuck a bottom in and put a top in to finish a piece. But even though things don't always work, part of what you're doing is you're trying to correct from a mistake that you shouldn't have done to begin with. So we'll put that aside. That shows you one way to go. You know, there's two ways, right? So let's look at the two ways. The one way to go is here. Now here, we took this piece and we cut it to try and get the knots to stretch out as long as we could. So if you look at this, you can say that gee, this knot started here and it finished up there, but it didn't go straight. It dipped a little, so there's nothing from here to there. So that was the most you got out of that. But the alternative to that is to do what we would call a fairy ring, where we want the knots to be round and scattered in a ring. So that would be like, here. I knew I wrote one. So here then is one that we would call the fairy ring, where the knots are slanting this way, not this way, this way. So consequently they're shorter, but it turns out to be a little easier to do because the more I turn the diameter, this ring of knots compresses. So it gets smaller, so you can see that. Because you know that the things are pointing toward the center. So the more you turn it, the more you can bring this out. So there's a couple of ways to look at it. Obviously, the more knots we have, the more dramatic it can be. For some reason, 7 knots works real good. I think the Orientals have a fascination with the number 7. In any case, whenever I get one with 7 knots, it usually sells. So that tells me something. I don't question why on that one. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to try and do is to take one of these, and I can put this here into, I've already put a tenon on the end, so I can put this in here. And there are, of course, a few special cuts. And whenever you do this, you know, belt and suspenders, bring the tailstock up. Okay. I'll go in, get into uniform, face shield. Safety glasses to begin with. And don't try to avoid the safety features, because no matter how good you are, things do come off sometimes.
Generally, when you least expect it.
When you least want it, yeah. Or if you're in a hurry to finish up for a show the next morning. Let me fix this a little bit. My face shield is always looking bad because my students use it. I won't let them turn without a face shield, and these things get dirty.
You're always suspicious of the demonstrator that shows up with a clean face shield.
Good one. Thanks, Ron. Okay, it's a start. So now I'm going to just step back for a minute and see what kind of things we got going here. Well, that's the wrong way. Bad start. So when and check this again, because some of the older Powermatics, and this is an A model, isn't it? They have a problem with tailstock creep because the clamping is different. So keep tightening this thing, make sure it's tight. Bring the tool rest up. And of course you never move the tool rest with the lathe running, right?
Well, you can just go ahead and sharpen the tool rest up and save yourself a lot of time.
Well, I did that. Okay, now most of this work is done with a roughing gouge. This particular one is the Carter and Son. The material is different. It's M42. It's supposed to be harder, and it is supposed to be. So let's just see how this goes. I want to come in here at an angle. Just want to chew up the corner. I'll finish that. Okay, so now I'm going to round this off. And as I come across the knot, pay a little attention here, because the knot on the end of the knot is end grained. And so it's going to cut differently, but do not let the tool know that there's a difference. And come across with a shear angle, and you should be good. Now let's take a look at what we got. Well, there's a little bit of tear out all across the knot, which I certainly want to avoid that. Let's try another one. Now what we have here, this is a Thompson 5/8 bowl gouge U-shape, and it's sharpened a little different. Probably you'd approve with this. And it is now useful as a roughing gouge right across that knot. Let's see if I can't do better. And sure enough, I took the tear out off the end of the knots. So when you are finished, when you get to this point, try and make sure that you do indeed get a clean cut, because it's going to be very difficult to get rid of that tear out later on. Okay, once more. A little more speed. Okay, now, as I look at it, if you look at this, you can see that the knots are leaning this way, going that way. So that means that I would ideally make this one to put it between centers. So I'm going to take and turn this down a bit more here, and then I'm going to bring this into it. So let me get rid of some wood here. Okay, now I'm going to put the thing on this end because I want to take wood off the other end. So I'm going to show you here how we're going to get close to where we think the knots are going to go. Start and we get the rolled out. Steve, you want to get this thing on? As you know, sometimes old tools are the best. This particular bowl gouge here in D15 belonged to the guy that started the wood turning symposium, and I ended up buying him from him before he passed away. come along flat, and I'm going to make myself a tenon because I want to take it off the other end. And this is a 5-inch chuck here, so we want it about there. And I'm going to measure that. I'm just marking that. And that's not enough. There is a ruler in here, believe it or not. It doesn't matter, I'll use other things to measure.
See this, Frank?
Yeah, oh, right. You like to count on somebody. So, being a 5-inch, we want to end up here with about a 4-inch, maybe a 4 1/4 inch. So just about to there.
You got this one. You got this one.
Oh, I did have one. I'll give it back to you. Okay, so I'm putting that, there's the 4. And I'm going to leave that just a hair bigger. Thank you, Ron, appreciate it. Now I'm coming into the tenon a little more than that. Double check. And I am very fussy about tenons because I have lost more beautiful pieces because the tenon wasn't done right. I want this to be 3/8 of an inch deep. In this case, I could either use a dovetail chuck or straight chuck because this is end grain, so this will compress very nicely either way. But I just cut it straight because I happen to have the chuck on here that is straight. Okay. Now, of course, the other thing to remember about the tenon, if you get the thing close to a 1/2 inch in depth, it's liable to bottom out, which means you destroyed all the goodness of holding that you got. Okay, now, if I was in my shop, I would take this and I would, before I trip over, I would take and bandsaw this down to about here. And I'm bandsawing it because all this material I don't need. But we don't have a bandsaw, so we're going to turn it down to there to where I think I can see the end of that knot showing up. So bear with me here for a minute while we get rid of some wood. Yeah, you need to go a little deeper in that, okay. So what I'm after here, as I told you before on the other piece, is I'm waiting to see where the ends of these knots are going to be. And I know that right there is the pith. I just exposed the pith. And this knot starts there and it ends up on the pith. But I'm still a little bit away from where I need to be. Let me take a bit more off of here. So you can see why I really miss having the bandsaw. Okay, now, when you start to look at this thing, oh, geez, I'm sorry guys for making a mess. It's what I do best. If you look at this, you can see that this knot is now leaving a track. So it's going from here to here, from here to here, and this one starts at the pith, which is right here. So the pith is off. So now I'm going to take and part this off. I can just get rid of this blob on the end here. Now why is this wobbling? It was true before, right? Now, you notice that this wood is particularly fresh. I'm going to take and hog some more out of here. Okay, so now we're rid of the excess wood, and as I explained to you before, what I'm looking for is exactly where all of this comes together. We know we got the pith right there, so the pith is off center, that's fine. I use that part of the design thing. But I need to take just a little bit more off of here. I think one more cut's gonna do it. You've heard that story before. Now, I'm a little more concerned about the quality of the cut as well. So I'm using the bowl gouge, 5/8. Getting a cleaner cut. I could have taken the, and used the skew for this very nicely. Although, one of the students I had years ago in Campbell came to our club to demonstrate. This is Harvey Meyer. And I asked him about his skew. And he said, yeah, I can use the skew, but I will never use the skew in a demo. Okay, I can understand his logic, so I won't. Okay, now look at it again. Can you see this swirl pattern coming up here? Does that show up?
Yeah.
So now we know that, gee, this is going to end here, and we're going to have a pattern. So at this point, we are now going to decide how we're going to finish this. And I'm going to take and do some measuring for a minute. Take this away. And what we have left here is 3.5 inches. And so now this means that I'm going to make a hollow form 3.5 inches in diameter. But I'm going to take the time to choose where I want it. Because now visualize this to be on the side. And because the pith is off center, I can be a little more dramatic with the shape. And I'll tell you right now, one of the biggest problems in turning Norfolk Island pine is getting the shape that you want. If you're either going to get a bowling ball or you're going to get something that looks like it belongs to where a ship would tie up to. The knots are telling you how this thing's going to shape. Well, you know, that was one of Richard Raffin's points. He said, you know, forget the grain, forget the color. The color's going to fade. All they're going to see 10 years from now is the shape. Well, he's dead wrong, because the shape 10 years from now isn't going to sell the piece today. So you heard that from me. Okay, now I'm going to set this. And I'm going to just mark. And as I look at this, knowing that this is above, gee, this knot right here would make a fine rise on there, which means that if we could do like a pear-shaped vase, or if we turned it around and we had this as the base. Now the other one, because these two knots are spread more, it's going to be more dramatic this way. Okay, so we're going to take and put this back here to, that's 3 1/4. It's going to be not too much, but that's all right. That's what we got. Had I had more material to work with here, then I could have had more shape. But this is what we got. So we got 1.5 and 1/8, 1 5/8. Okay, I'm going to mark that here, and I want this lined up with the center of the pith. So right there is where I'm going to mark that. Now here we want to take and make sure that we come across to the other side and come out. So if I swing it around and I know that this line comes across, I'm going to finish up here. So it'll be right there. That should be diagonally across. Yep. Okay. All right. So now I can take this off of here. A bad habit of mine is laying tools down on the lathe bed. I should never do that. Oh, thank you. As a matter of fact, the club one time, they made a rule when I was trying to break the habit, and they said every time I laid a tool down, it was going to cost me 50 cents. And it didn't take me long to chew up $5.
So Frank, those marks are for the top and bottom of the vessel?
What?
Those marks are for the top and the bottom of the vessel?
Yes, yes, it was white center and dry center.
Yeah, the marks you just made represent the top and the bottom of the vessel.
Right, exactly. And I played around with this long enough until I could see where I thought it would be most dramatic. And I'm going to have you look at this, because if you get nothing else out of this tonight, I think you can see the pattern that's emerging and what I want to have happen to that. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be exact, but it's going close. Okay. So now I'm going to take the piece, put it between centers. We got us a brand new step center, which is actually ideal for this work. And what's so ideal about it? Well, it's ideal because I can put this in here, I can put this up to where I think it ought to be, and then I can move it 1/8 of an inch if I want. By the same token, I'm going to take this out of here. There's a key here somewhere. Oh, here it is. They're on top. And what I want to do is I want to take the point away, because if I use the point, it's got to go in the same place every time, no matter, unless I move it 1/4 inch, and I'm not going to move it that far. I'm going to put this back in here with your stuff, and I'm going to put this up to there, and bring this across. And I think that should be good. We'll find out. So obviously here, again, if I had my bandsaw, what would I have done? Well, I just said, gee, this piece is going to, here's the meridian, and I don't need this much, so I could get rid of this much here, and I could get rid of the same amount over there. What would that do for me? Well, it would make it a little faster. But let's just do it this way, because this means that we can indeed turn it. So, for those of you who are not good at turning air, you'll love this. Okay, I can come across. Now I can begin to see what I'm working with here. Well, nothing much has happened yet, but I can see that I need to approach this knot, okay? So I'm going to take away the diameter here. Gotta go easier. Step center won't hold. Now, if you notice, I'm turning from the bottom up here. And I'm being a little cautious because my drive is not the best. And bear in mind that I'm coming across the end grain and the knots and the side grain on the rest of the piece. So in order to make it a little easier to go, I'm going to now go ahead and turn myself a tenon here so I can put it in a chuck. And normally I would mark this off for a 2-inch tenon by laying it on the tailstock and drawing this around. So there's my pre-measured 2-inch tenon, right every time. And I'll just turn this in a little more. And now I see it on full. Trying to speed this up a little. So as I said, this is now going to be a square tenon. I like to be a little deeper than that. So 3/8 is about fine. But I want to always make sure that the very bottom of that tenon does not have a radius in there. In other words, you're coming down and straight across. If that has a radius, then the jaw is going to push it away, and it's not going to be as strong as it could be otherwise. Just a little bit in that corner. With the bedan. Now you notice this is a French bedan. The sides are parallel. Somewhere here is an English bedan because that's paper. I didn't know that. I looked it up. Okay. Does all this make sense to everybody? Like I said, this is really the key to what I'm trying to get across. It is, it's important, you know, because if you follow this part, it's going to save you a lot of time in the end. Boy, I'm having a good night. I haven't dropped the tool on the floor yet. But it's early, right? Okay, I can seat that very good on the face of the chuck. I can tighten it. Now, since this is a side grain, I'm using a straight chuck rather than a dovetail. And turn it before you start. Seems like I heard that somewhere. Okay. So now I can approach it from the other end. Yeah, I'm sure somebody is going to say, since this is indeed, it's almost a straight thing, isn't it? But no, you cannot use a roughing gouge on this because the grain will only be cut here and it would jam right here. So that is out, although I agree with the might be a little faster. Yeah, you can hear I'm cutting across the notch. So don't allow the tool to bounce. If you let that happen, you lost it. So how do you prevent that? Well, first you always sharpen the tool. And second of all, if need be, you put more pressure on the tool rest so that you're not trying to follow the bevel. Well, you're following the bevel, but the bevel is not the primary control. Yeah, we should be starting to see a little bit of the knot showing up. There it is, not too far away. Yep, there we go, okay. I'm going to take the rest of this out now. Good practice for doing natural edge bowls, by the way. Okay, we're getting close to beginning to see a little bit of pattern emerge. There we go. You can hear the difference now. You got to be aware of the nut coming across, and it's going to affect the cut. I don't want to jump. Now you begin to see this is where the pith was over there. Now here's where the pith is here. So I'm taking more off the back end than the front end, which I could swing the whole thing over, but no, I'm starting to see the pattern I want. Let's keep going here. Now, we're starting to see anything? Well, you're seeing that these two knots are going to end up there. I got to take more off of them. You can see that this knot is now starting to get long, and this one over here hasn't joined the party yet. So let's get him in. And of course, the secret here is don't take a cut bigger than what you can control. Now we can put some shape on it. Let's see what we got here. Obviously there's still a bump, but can the camera pick up this pattern? Yes. This is kind of neat. It's a shame it isn't bigger. If it was this big, man, this would be fantastic. Now I'm going to take a bit more off of here. Okay, now we're getting closer because the knots are showing up. We still need to take a little bit more off of there, but now I've got some tear on that one. I don't like that. So let me switch to the other tool, and this is the U-shaped gouge. Incidentally, one of the places, sometimes you forget things. However, we recently had the club, we had a a demo with Barbara Dill. And of course, she's do this off-center stuff, which means that you're turning thump, as you're getting it in. And of course, I couldn't wait to try it the next morning. And all I got was a bunch of jagged. So I looked again. And what she did was she took a bowl gouge and ground it straight across as though it was a roughing gouge. So this gives a shear. You can get that shear under control. It doesn't give you a very large cut, but it works much better. And in this case, I want to guarantee that we have this good shear cut because we need to cut across the knot without having any tear out. I think this might be getting a little dull. Yeah, I need to take just a little bit more off of here, but now it's starting to show up into a pattern. Okay, the half-inch bowl gouge seems to be the right thing. And as I tell all my students all the time, pay attention to your shavings, they never lie to you. If the shavings are right for nice fluffy things like this, you're probably getting a clean shear cut. And okay, so now what's happened here is that we have one knot that could emerge if I took more off. We have one knot here that doesn't look like it's ever going to join the party. Well, I can take a little bit more off of there. But you have these two showing up well. The more I cut in diameter, the longer the knots are going to be. So if that's what you're after, that's what I'm going to do. Making sure I get the shear off the side grain. Now you can hear it. Hear that tick, tick, tick. Now you can see what I mean about getting a dramatic shape. One of the common shapes you end up with is that of a fat Cuban cigar, which I guess is not all bad. Okay, I'm not going to take too much more off of this now because, as you can see, the pattern is emerged. I think you have gotten the idea. And at this point, I would take a drill a hole and run a boring bar through it. I'm going to take this off and I'll let you look at it. And also, if you can see, if I cut more off of here, this knot will get longer. If I cut more off the diameter, these four would show up, and there's one knot down here that we haven't even touched yet. But take a look at that and see if that makes sense to you. And if you have any questions at this point, let me try and answer them while this is fresh.
I got one. Where do you get your blanks?
What's that?
Where do you get your wood? Where do you get your wood?
Oh, out my yard. The deal here is that the guys that cut down trees for a living, if they take the trees to a dump, they have to pay $40 a ton to dump it. I'll give them $20 for beer they leave at my house. So it's a win-win. However, I get a lot of wood that I don't want. And it's been so dry, we've been able to can't have bonfires, it's starting to pile up. And obviously, you can't put it out on the street for the trash pickup. It will like that. Can't get away with that.
Well, is there a lot of Long Island pine growing here?
Yeah, in South Florida, it's full of it.
Okay.
You drive south and you go up on an overpass, you look at all the green things that are sticking up above everything else, that's Norfolk Island pine.
Yeah, you know, a little bit of the background here. The tree was discovered by Captain Cook on the Norfolk Island in the South Pacific. He saw this thing, all he saw were masts for sailing ships. Transplanted it to Hawaii, where they call it Cook pine. And we really have two kinds. We have Araucaria hericana is the one, and this is Araucaria heterophyllus. Now, the Araucana is what they call the monkey puzzle. And the puzzle is how one can climb up because all the cones are so sharp that they would draw blood. And you have to be careful about that one. There are two growing in Sarasota, but in case you got kids with bare feet running around, you're going to get overblooded, so we try to avoid it. Yeah.
How fresh do you usually turn it?
How fresh? Well, it depends on the amount of salt. Now, obviously, this was fresh. This tree was cut down 3 days ago, and I wouldn't normally use it if it was all I had. Whereas if the tree had stood a little longer, it would look like this. Now you're setting the spall pattern. And here, so this is normally how I would work with a blank